Hi, this is Chuck Stull, continuing our look at microprocessors, looking at a really important firm in this industry, Intel. As we looked last time, economies of scale plus learning curves uh, and perhaps the existence of network externalities are going to lead to a dominant firm. In microcomputer processors, this firm was Intel with 80 to 90% market share, um, originally with Windows machines and later with Macs and Linux systems as well. Now, Intel, like Microsoft, like IBM, it has been very aggressive toward its competitors. So let's look at some of their conduct. Intel has used what have been characterized as threats and rewards to coerce computer manufacturers like Dell, HP, IBM, or Acer, Lenovo, NEC, in a European case, right, to use Intel chips exclusively. Now, there is another manufacturer, AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, and they found that they had a really hard time selling competing microprocessors to the major manufacturers because of Dell's contracts, or because of Intel's contracts. Intel also was accused of pricing below the cost of production, that they would give discounts to computer manufacturers in order to get those exclusive deals and then give them rebates for volume for the number of chips they ordered. In some cases, the marginal cost of Intel chips to the manufacturers were zero, and AMD couldn't sell chips at a price of zero and stay in business. And so that led to accusations of predatory pricing. Intel's response was this is really just a matter of competition at work. There were also concerns about technical incompatibilities, and Intel allegedly introduced with intent um, errors that would show up if competing chips were included in a manufacturing, particularly what was seen as a secret redesign. And they degraded the connections between the central processing units and competing graphics chips, um, as well as publishing false reports on the performance of competing chips. And again, like the other companies we've seen who are in a dominant position and use aggressive tactics, Intel found itself subject to antitrust action. Now, in the 1990s, there were several private antitrust suits, AMD's and others, brought against Intel, and those were settled. There was a Federal Trade Commission investigation, and there was a Federal Trade Commission restriction on mergers between Intel and Digital Equipment, and there was some forced licensing as part of that agreement. In the 2000s, the FTC ended their second investigation under the George Bush administration. But there were cases brought in Japan, in Korea, and the European Union over similar types of anti-competitive behavior. And Intel lost all three cases. In Japan, they were told to stop their behavior. Korea had a small fine, around $25 million. But the European Union in 2009 had a major fine, 1.45 billion euros, so over a billion and a half dollars, that they leveled against Intel for antitrust violations. Now, in 2020, just a month or so ago, Intel was still contesting that fine. There was also a private suit brought by AMD that Intel settled for $1.25 billion paid to AMD and their lawyers, along with an agreement to stop the anti-competitive business practices. In 2008, a new investigation by the Federal Trade Commission started, and it resulted in the FTC filing a case that Intel had illegally used its dominant position to stifle competition and bolster monopoly in CPUs and in graphic chips. And the FTC used Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission Act, which prohibits unfair methods of competition, and which at the time was a relatively new use of that law. Hadn't been tested in the court because the Federal Trade Commission had traditionally used Sherman and Clayton Acts. So this was seen as a potential new tool for antitrust enforcement. In 2010, the case was settled by negotiated agreement between the Federal Trade Commission and Intel, and Intel agreed to not threaten their customers, to not bundle goods together, and not to create special offers that were meant to exclude competitors. They also agreed to not report deceptively on chip performance, to provide technical access for developers and to disclose those technical details, and to maintain technical compatibilities so that other companies' products would continue to work, and to revise their patent license terms. So again, some restrictions on content settled that particular case. And again, we don't have a strong court finding on the effectiveness of Section 5 of the FTC Act, which would have been interesting for scholars in the antitrust area. This has been Chuck Stull talking about Intel and its role in the microprocessor industry, reporting from Kalamazoo College. Thanks for listening. I'll be back soon.